Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev. Today we're taking a break from our major projects to work on a small one-shot project. And to keep things nice and short, this is an idea spawned from another project I hope to get to sometime in the future, but that project is quite dark in nature, probably a little too much for current events. So instead we'll try a similar, simplified, and less dark take. On top of that, I just want to try some new things that don't mesh well with our current list of projects. So, we'll be creating a game about, well, simplifying the concept of life. As much as it's not meant to be some deep concept, I want to create an experience of human life from birth to death. Included in this experience will be a randomly generated world of events and an end goal. The player will spend their quote-unquote life trying to find the end goal, or just experience the events as they discover them. Indeed, I am trying to make a walking simulator of sorts, with some ambiguous flair, so let's get to the coding and see if I can succeed. First up was adding our sprites for each stage of life the player goes through, starting from baby all the way to super old. And not only would sprites need to be defined, but walk speeds as well, with the more youthful ages being faster and the older being slower, with really old being really slow. Next, it was time to age the player by using a simple counter and stage variable. The counter counts a determined amount of frames. When it hits 0, it adds to the stage value, which ages the player. This is then reflected in the sprites drawn and the player's walk speed. And to make sure each playthrough is differently timed, the counter threshold was randomized. This ended up working as we needed it to. The counter did its thing, aging the player as it went along. Also, with this project, I wanted to test some new animation tech. These sprites are created using a new animation method that'll help me animate larger sprites in the future. However, it's still a work in progress, which, funny enough, can be seen in the animation quality of these walking sprites, as some are definitely animated better than others. Anyway, with the player aging properly, it was time to create the world that they would traverse. The world will be quote-unquote open, but also consist of quote-unquote rooms the player can explore. We're using that same drop and spread style of generation with rooms spreading out based on positioning. So far so good. Now it's time to add the flavor. In the World Builder object, a state system would be used to sequence the building and refining of our rooms, starting with the initial spawn of the rooms. Next, the event-specific rooms would be spawned, and finally the last end goal room would be spawned. And as you can see, this provided us with enough varied space to explore, the red rooms representing event rooms and the yellow being the end goal room. So with that all working, it was time to get back to the refinement process. I decided to forego usual methods of our room layouts to save time, and instead simply drew them out via the sprite editor. Using the sprite as the room layouts along with precise frame collisions, this was a quick and dirty way to generate simple rooms without any extra code. But please note that I really don't recommend doing this in your own projects. Anyway, back to the World Builder code, rooms would then choose a random layout based on the images within that room layout sprite, which gave us exactly what we needed for this little experimental project. And it was here that real-life responsibilities forced me to take a little break. One break later, and it was time to work on the world events. Much like the player, this would require an array. The events consist of the end goal, a fake version of the end goal, several scenery-based events, and an event featuring what I called a moose, which as you'll see later isn't an actual moose. Why moose for a road event? I don't know. In the step event, I wanted the moose to possibly be spooked by the player, so using a distance check, if the moose was skittish, it would then run from the player if they got too close. And once they've reached a wall, they disappear like some ethereal being of symbolic nature. And for one of the other events, a large number of flora would be spawned somewhere in the room. The remaining events would simply be for visual purposes and required no extra code. The results were as expected, with the moose seemingly being one of the rarest events to find. But after a ton of resets, I was finally able to get some footage of a grazing moose, which is actually my favorite animation of the bunch. Not perfect, and it didn't necessarily convey what I was going for, but boy was it close for a first time using something new. But anyway, with that done, all that was left was to add some final bits of visual flair to pretty things up. Color and admittedly oddly colored flora were added to the generation code. and the end results were somewhat closer to what I had envisioned. A slow, general aging of the player over time, where the initial goal is to find the end. But with so much to see, how do you spend that time? Is the end goal really the end? I mean, there is no win condition, so reaching the end goal doesn't end the game or the run. The only way for things to end is when the player reaches their end of their quote-unquote life. So personally, I made it a goal to find another moose, which ended up being a legitimately rare occurrence. And after doing multiple runs of no success, I decided to do one final run before giving up. It was during this final run that I actually found one. However, before I could even get close enough to see if it was even skittish, my time was up. Now again, the goal of this project wasn't to make something profound, but man, did I end up enjoying that experience. Maybe I've just been cooped up for too long, but that end screen in particular hit me in a way I hadn't expected. And it actually kind of makes me excited to see if I can recreate that in the project that this idea was inspired from. But of course, that's all future talk. For now, this brings us to the end of this one-shot and today's episode of Let's Delve. So leave a like if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already, and leave your thoughts on this unique one-shot in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.